What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So today we're taking a look at my Marineland 5-gallon Pico tank. So I purchased this tank from Amazon for about, I believe it was about $50. I'll have to double check, but I thought it would be a great tank to keep these guys. Wait a second.
A few moments later.
These guys. They're so hard to spot in here. But those, I have two of those guys. Those are dwarf seahorses, and this is their tank. So again, this is a 5-gallon Marineland Pico tank, and it's actually designed for fresh water. So I had to find a way to make this appropriate for dwarf seahorses, because if you don't know much about seahorses, especially dwarf seahorses, they're very poor swimmers. They kind of hover around, and any flow that's too strong will just blow them away. So I wanted to go with something very simple, very minimalistic, and just make it an ideal environment for them to do well. So the first thing I did, if you look back here, you will see this material, this mesh material, and it's actually window netting that you kind of use when you open your window, like a mesh to let air through but keep bugs out. So I went with something like this. I picked it up from Home Depot for around 20 bucks, I believe. And as you can see, I got a whole lot of it. This is 36 inches by 84 inches, just for a couple little slithers, but it was definitely well worth it. So on this tank, there were 3 locations that I knew I needed to plug up. One was back here. You can see, if you look really well, some mesh up here and here. Now what this will do is allow small debris to go through to the back of the tank, but also keep the seahorses from being sucked in. Now, although this is very unlikely, it was just a precaution I wanted to make sure I took. So pretty much these are all like water drain areas to allow water to drain and to filter out debris. And I just used silicone, actually a very moderate, very light amount of silicone, and I just used that to adhere the mesh to the ABS or whatever plastic is back there. In addition, initially, I was worried about this back section of the tank. Now it's obviously not, I'm aware that it's not an issue, but so I broke off a tube and I siliconed this tube over here, just because when the lid's laid on the tank, there was a gap. So I wasn't really sure how the tank was going to operate yet, and I wasn't sure what behavior to expect from the seahorses. So I was kind of fearful that that gap would allow them to kind of slip through and get into the back of the tank. So I added this as a precautionary measure, just to ensure that they stay in here and not get back there. So that's kind of the modifications that I really made to the tank. These were absolutely necessary, in my opinion, if you're gonna use this for a dwarf seahorse tank. Now let's go into some of the equipment. So I'm currently running a Phoenix 50-watt digital display heater. It's a titanium heater, and I use the titanium heater for all my systems currently. I haven't had one fail as of yet, but my plan is, just to be on the safe side, I'm going to get controllers, and I am going to attach a heater controller to every single one of these tanks. Initially, I had it in the back section where the filtration happens, and it worked pretty well. But the problem was I was having some flow and some restriction issues from the filter that goes in. This cartridge right here is designed to take those freshwater blue filters, and it slides into this. I can't remove the cartridge now because this acrylic tube is blocking it from coming out. But what I didn't realize was it was getting clogged up because of the higher density of stuff in this seawater, and it was restricting the flow of the water. That in turn was preventing the heated water back there to flow back into the main tank here. And what I was reading on the heater was a completely incorrect temperature of around 80 something degrees. So I assumed the heater failed. But as soon as I pulled that out, I noticed the temperature starting to drop, and I realized that actually what was happening was the water back there was getting hotter than the water in here, and the heater was reading that incorrectly. So due to that heating issue, I decided that I was going to run it behind the rockscape. It's just suction cup to the back of this plastic, and that's it. Now that's a good segue into my rockscape. This is shelf rock. I picked up, I believe it's 2 pieces, and I essentially just hit it in certain spots till it broke. And then I used this epoxy that really didn't work well, but in combination with some coral glue from Fix, I actually had a bottle of it, and the epoxy, I was able to get everything to be rock solid. I've removed this many times, maneuvered it, and it doesn't come apart. The only part that comes off is, you see this piece right here. Well, that's essentially there to slow down the flow of water that's coming out from the return nozzle, which is right behind it. And the reason for that is, again, seahorses are really poor swimmers. They can't handle the flow. Matter of fact, I did clean this tank last week, and I had to remove this rockwork. But the main reason was because I had a fish in here, which is called a crested oyster goby. I'll show you him. My glass is pretty dirty right now, but that little black speck you see right there is my crested oyster goby. If you're not sure what he looks like, look him up or look on my Instagram. I should have a couple pictures of him on there. But he was the other inhabitant of this tank, and he was doing really well until one day I caught him attempting to eat my seahorse. I don't think he really wanted to eat it. It was more of it looked small, it was swimming around, looked like potential food. But he made 2 attempts at it, and that was it for me. I was already scheduled to clean the tank that day, so I pulled the rock out, caught him, throw him in the big tank, and that's that. So again, sorry, back to the rocks. This is shelf rock, and shelf rock, the difference is it's cut, so the back side of this rock is all flat, like perfectly flat, like you sawed something in half and you had 2 sides. That's essentially what the back of this rock work looks like. And then I glued them together and I put them in there. I have currently 3 coral in this tank. The main coral in this tank is a photosynthetic gorgonian, and I picked it up during the last YouTube meetup at my local store, which is Something Fishy. I believe I got it for around $30-something, $36, somewhere around there. And it was actually even bigger than this. I cut off a piece of it and I threw it in the 40-gallon tank where it's doing really well. Now in here it's doing okay. I wouldn't say it's doing particularly well, and right now it's currently battling some algae that's due to my water, and I am addressing that. I did try changing my filters on my Aquatic Life water filtration kit, however, my RDI kit, however, it's just insufficient for the levels of TDS I believe that's coming from my water. So I am switching it out for a BRS 75-gallon per day system that have been greatly suggested to me by some very experienced hobbyists. So currently this is what all my tanks are waiting on. I'm going to put in that order today and try and get that in as soon as possible. Address all these algae issues that are resulting from that. But I cleaned the glass mostly. I didn't want to disturb the seahorses too much, so I kind of stopped about 3/4 of the way down. But that gives you sufficient viewing space to see these guys in action. So this is just a big colony gorgonian. Up here, I know they're not really open right now. I don't normally keep these lights on. Generally the lights in this tank are off. There is a window back here in my basement, and most of the time there's some decent light coming in, and the tanks actually get good lighting. So I actually leave that light off, especially to control the algae issues in this tank. So this is a purple tip, green centered GSP, but that's pretty much it. Simple. This was dry aragonite sand, and now it's live sand. I let this tank cycle for a couple of weeks while these guys were acclimating, and you know, that's pretty much it for in here. Moving to the back, I'm running a DIY ATO from eBay actually, and I had to do a little bit of modification on here, but it fits perfectly. This is my water hose that goes to my pump in my ATO reservoir, and I'm running the standard pump on this tank. I believe there is some filter floss in here in the back, but the main source of nutrient export for this tank is my biological bacteria. I pretty much stuff this tank with bacteria and them take hold of the rock and the sand and whatever media I have in the back filtration section of the tank. The light I am running currently is a light by Lumi. It's called a Pixie 30, I believe. I picked up on Amazon for around 85 bucks, and it was more of a trial light that I bought to throw on this tank. But the main issue I had with it on this tank, it was making it very hard to film this tank. It just had an issue with the way it put out its light, and the camera hated it. And I couldn't really run blues and film anything. So if I wanted to film, I had to run whites. So I swapped it out, and I just happened to throw it on this tank because it would majority run whites anyways, because you know, I gotta see my seahorses. See, they're always out and about when I'm around. They like to put on a little show, go for a swim, do some hunting. So it's found its home on this tank. However, I don't know if I'm going to keep it on this tank. There's one more light I want to try, a nano light, and I'm going to try that first. But that's really all that is on this tank. Very, very simple. This tank has a base, and the tank just sits on it. Quality of the tank, pretty decent. I mean, the silicone that holds this plastic in the back that separates the filtration area is very, very flimsy, and it's kind of just feels cheap. But the curved glass on the tank is very, very premium, and it's another plastic back that finishes off the tank, but no leaks. 100% it works. Same as this one, which is almost the same setup, but this was set up for freshwater. It is now saltwater, and it works flawlessly. So here are the seahorses. They're actually currently very active right now. I'm not sure why. They're pretty full. He just ate a copepod. But I try to moderate how much I feed these guys because they kind of just hunt all day. As long as the food is there, they will just hunt and hunt and hunt and hunt until they consume just about anything they see. But that moves into, what do I feed my seahorses? Now, I do want to try some options. I heard baby brine shrimp is a great one. However, there's also a caveat. I heard that brine shrimp just doesn't quite have a good amount of, you know, substance in terms of, it's just not a very healthy food for any sea creature to consume all the time. So that being said, I switched to copepods. I didn't switch. I actually tried adult brine shrimp, which I then realized were way too big for them to consume because these guys are tiny. So I had about 3,000 or so in this tank, and I ended up just pulling them out and feeding them to my other tanks. I went ahead and switched to tiger pods, which are a bigger copepod that they can see, that I can see, because I know I wanted to make sure that they were eating, and I wanted to see it with my own eyes. I didn't want them to assume that they were eating. I wanted to see the copepod on the glass. I wanted to see the seahorse come up to the copepod and suck it up and don't see the copepod anymore. The reason for that is I've kept other creatures like this, and you would see them and you'd assume they're eating, and you'd say they're eating, and then out of nowhere you'd come down and they would have perished. They would just have died, and that was not an option for me. But these guys are easy to tell if they're feeding. You see their bellies get nice and round and puffy when they're eating. When they're not eating, their bellies get really skinny and flat. So they're easy to tell when they're eating. Also, you'll know when they're eating because they start changing color. From my pods, they turn green, a darker green. They're starting to whiten out a little bit because of the scape, but they still get a lot darker when they're healthy and happy. When they're a lot stressed out and hungry, they're very pale. And I know that because one of the seahorses was eating readily while the other one was very slow to come around and eat. And one was always fat and dark green, and one was always skinny and very white. And finally, luckily, he came around. They're both eating now. But just some tips for you guys if you ever plan on keeping seahorses. So currently, what does this tank cost? The main tank itself, around 50 bucks. Rocks are around 30. This Gorgonian's around 30. I would say that's all you need. Sand was around $10. And you don't even use all of it. Heater around 50. ATO around 40. Light, obviously you can pick any light for this. You can pick a $10 bright white light and it would work. I went with an $85 light. So you can add those up and you will know exactly how much it costs to set up a tank identical to this. Everything you need for this tank, minus the ATO, you can pretty much find on Amazon, and you can replicate everything that's here. And I will leave some links for you guys if I remember, so that way you guys can replicate this. But good luck finding door seahorses. They're not the easiest things to come by. I just happened to stumble across them in Maryland while I was hanging out with some other YouTubers, Inappropriatereefer, DMV Reefer, who's on Instagram, Mighty Nano Tanks. You know, we always get together, as well as some of the other guys, DC Reefer and Telegram. You can go look these guys up. They're very knowledgeable, very popular guys that know what they're doing most of the time, just like me. I don't think I know what I'm doing at all. I just wing it, but you get the idea. I try to learn as much as I can, and these guys literally are like my mentors and they help me out. So go for it. Actually, this was all Inappropriatereefer's idea. You know, he kind of pressured me into doing this, and I did it, and here they are. Awesome creature. They get about 2 inches max, and they're probably about their adult size right now. Very laid back, swim around, they hunt all day. That's pretty much it. You know, if you like seahorses, you always wanted to keep some, there you go, some seahorses that you can keep in a small volume tank. Now, water changes. I don't really do many water changes on this tank. I've actually only done one, and I won't be doing another one until I get my RDI kit in. But as long as I don't really see any issues with the coral or algae, I'm going to try and keep this water change scheduled to a bare minimum of whenever I find it necessary. Just because I just don't think that waste from these guys are that much, and I think the biological bacteria can handle it. And I use calc washer for the parameters in terms of alkalinity, calcium, magnesium. I use calc washer to handle that in my ATO. So that's pretty much it. I don't want to keep you guys too long. If you guys have any questions, don't forget to ask. Definitely leave a comment. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys want to know. I will do my best to answer. I really don't know that much, guys. Anything I do, I literally research it just like anybody else. But if you're curious and you just want to see if I know, maybe I'll know. I also know a bunch of guys. We're in a group chat. We talk every day. Inappropriatereefer, again, like I said, in Mighty Nano Tanks, you guys know some of the popular ones. We talk every day. DC Reefer, and these guys can definitely chip in, and I can ask around and get you guys an answer on your question. So thank you guys for watching. Like always, have a good one.